stream the meeting. Stand by, Michael.
Okay.
10 seconds. Stream the meeting. Stand by, Michael.
Okay.
There we go. 10 seconds. Piece of cake. We're live, everybody. I'm Aslan Hajavani, joined by recruiting analyst for WarChant.com, Michael Langston. It's a happy hour edition of the program.
Stand
just
by,
us
Michael.
two. So
There we go.
Drink it in. Piece of cake. We're glad to be
We're
here
live,
with you.
everybody.
Michael, how are you, man?
Yep, doing good, man. I'm feeling good, and I know it's not the most productive day as far as FSU recruiting, but I'm doing great. We're going to push forward, and we're going to make this fun. There's going to be a fun happy hour.
There we go. That's the spirit. Use the promo code WarChant30 if you're not already a member of the Ultimate Seminole Sports Source. You'll get all the great access to Michael's insight and recruiting updates over on the premium recruiting board, as well as a whole bunch of stuff. But if you're here, you're probably interested in recruiting. So, Michael, as we warmed up, had our pre-production meeting, if you will, I went and posted the thread on the PRB about our show. Call us 850-792-5730. I think the number should be somewhere on the screen. I'm looking at all these pinned threads about offensive linemen in Florida State. And I'm like, well, look at that. But apparently that hasn't been Black Friday. Maybe it is Black Friday. Just hasn't worked out the way probably a lot of Florida State recruiting fans were hoping.
Yeah, for offensive line, I think Christopher Perez was an offensive lineman from NIU. It's the same school as Ryan Roberts. There had been some contact with FSU. They had offered, they want him. I think they were getting some positive, conversations, but later I was going to do a story and I contacted him and he told me he just committed to Temple, and Temple, and people were like, "Why Temple?" Well, he has a relationship with a former coach there. I think Rod Carey is his name. That he was his head coach. So, and as I talked to you about this, Aslan, a lot of times transfers are all about if there's a personal connection, those teams usually have an advantage. And I think that's what's kind of happened with the Perez kid they were looking at the center position, but he's going to Temple. But and then later after that, shortly after that, Caleb Johnson committed to Auburn. It wasn't really a big thing because I didn't really consider FSU a major player. I thought Notre Dame and Auburn were the main teams, with LSU also being in the picture. I think Miami was trying to make a push, but I always thought that Auburn and Notre Dame were the teams. But then I heard more buzz about Auburn, which I told people on the message board yesterday. So he committed. The one that probably hurts the worst is his teammate Garner Langlow. He also committed to Auburn shortly after that. I talked to somebody that's really close to Garner, and they said FSU is very much still in it, and that this was a reflection of Caleb, because Caleb went there. So I think this is going to be a thing where FSU is going to really actively push hard for Garner. They understand. And here's the thing I tell people, and I answer this question on the board. It's kind of a catch-22 for FSU, where they started talking to Garner right after the Rivals camp, which was in I think January or February. And the plan was for Garner to visit shortly after that, probably in March. And then I think they were going to offer then in March. And obviously the pandemic happened. They didn't envision that happening. Maybe they should have go ahead and just pushed and done the offer, but I think they wanted to do it in person. Then when they knew they couldn't do it, they offered them now. And I think it made them pause for a little bit. But then at the same time, I think it's like a lot of these kids, they don't want to go into their senior season not having a commitment or a place in place. Doesn't mean they're going to stay there, because I think FSU is going to get a visit out of him. I think he will visit. I think they will push for him. But that was kind of the catch-22. Like, you could criticize them in one way for not offering right in February, but at the same time, they didn't see this pandemic coming, and they thought he was going to visit in March. So it's kind of a
slack on that.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. I mean, you could bitch and whine about it, but it's like there's nothing you can do. But that was the bigger loss, because there was some momentum building a little bit because the offer was really coveted by him. But I think this is just what this staff is facing when you don't have the chance to have the kid. I think the biggest loss for FSU isn't the visits of getting kids on campus. It's the fact that they couldn't play and have a spring game, or spring practice where these kids could go and see what they're going to be. or spring games, even more important, where that's an actual game. They can see, hey, this is what they're going to look like. I got a feel for them now. And so that's the practices and the spring game is what really, not the visits, but the spring game really set these guys back for a first year staff, because nobody really knows except for what they did at Memphis. And so kids need to see that. And I said this on the board probably like 5 minutes ago. It's like, I know people don't want to hear this, but you're going to have to practice in patience with the staff to let them do their jobs and let kids see these guys. It's like, until you see them, there's nothing really they can do except build relationships. And we saw that win over with Hunter Washington with them landing him. So you're going to land some guys, but you're also going to lose some, probably more so lose some than land some, because of kids needing to see what the product is going to be. It's just what they're facing. It sucks. It's not fair. They've been dealt a bad hand. I mean, in so many ways. Like, I can't remember a staff being a new staff having to overcome as much as what they've had to overcome. They had to overcome 2 really crappy years with Willie Taggart. A coach before Willie Taggart left because he didn't want to be there and he wanted to go to Texas A&M. He didn't want to be there anymore. So that set them back. So it's like, in essential, they're set back like 3 or 4 years. So they're having to recreate and start over a whole new program, basically. So I know people don't want, that's the reality. I wanted to lay it out. That's how I feel on the subject. And that's just kind of what they're dealing with right now.
There was a potential glimmer of hope for some of the fans when they saw the Rivals Portal Twitter account tweet out the news about Stuart Reese, who's on your guys' screen here, 2016 four-star offensive lineman who committed and played. I mean, I think he's played in over 24 games for Mississippi State over the years. He's in the portal. He's from the state of Florida, so you start putting all these things together, but it might not add up to Tallahassee, though, right, Michael?
Yeah, because the team that recruited him really hard out of, the coaches who recruited him were the coaches at Florida now, because they were at Mississippi State. So they're the ones that signed him. So I would say the relationships there. His brother also plays at Florida. But stranger things have happened, guys. Sometimes kids don't do what you think they're going to do with a personal relationship. Sometimes they do. I know early on in the recruitment for Stuart Reese, before he even thought about committing, FSU was his favorite school going in. That was way back. I can't even remember how far that was, but early on, FSU was a team that he said, like, hey, I like these guys the best. But I would give, just because I think more often than not, relationships in transfers are the big thing, or early playing time, or seeing the field early. That's the only thing I think can trump relationships, is this early playing time, and everyone's screaming like, Michael, early playing time is a tackle. FSU can offer that, but the difference is you can offer that when kids know what you're going to do, what you're going to run, how your team looks. Stewart, unless he has some connection with Norvell, is not going to know how Memphis looked. So I'm sure FSU is going to press on that. They're going to show them what they're going to do, what they are. I'm sure there's a relationship with Chris Marv, who was at Mississippi State last year. I think he has a connection with the kids. So I'm sure that helps. Chris is an excellent recruiter. I think he will help them. I think he will put them in the picture. But they are going to have to overcome the previous relationships that Mullen and that former Mississippi State staff and now Florida staff has with Stewart. But I definitely think they're going to pursue him. I have no doubts about that.
Yeah. I mean, John Hevesy, the offensive line coach at Mississippi State at that time when Stuart Reese committed to them, is in Gainesville too. So, and to your point, I mean, the brother being there too, obviously is not the biggest encouraging sign for a Florida State fan.
Right.
Well, here's the thing, Michael, this isn't a criticism, but is this not the reality that we live in, that obviously with the pandemic going on, you have a limited amount of face time. They did the best they could in that small amount of time they actually did have. I mean, those first few practices, there were students galore, high school coaches everywhere along those practices. But at the end of the day, you don't have a staff that has a lot of embedded, deep relationships with programs, in the state of Florida, or we're seeing a lot of these elite recruits kind of commit to. So it's going to take time to build those things. And that's the unfortunate part of this kind of combination, confluence of events. They don't have the time to build these relationships. They don't have the time to have face-to-face contact. So it's really tough to sell that when you don't have the pre-existing, I guess, reputation, right? Because we saw how good David Johnson is pulling a guy like Corey Wren out of the state of Louisiana like that. But we're talking about like Ocala. These guys have been probably talking to Auburn staff for years.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, if they had offered him in February and he had visited in February or March, I think we'd have a different conversation where I think FSU could have pulled it off. But I think that's what they're facing. And you touched on it, the relationships. And you look at the kids they've already landed. Hunter Washington, very strong ties to Marcus Woodson. He's worked with him. He understands what he's going to do. He feels comfortable, loyalty. He feels good with him. All the new commitments that they've gotten, Jake Slaughter, they were on early. They were on really early with Jake before anybody. Then Auburn and Florida eventually came later, but the relationship was already built with FSU. They really established that. So that's why I say a lot of this class is going to be relationships that they have built, that they've built a connection with these kids that, they've done it for a significant amount of time. So that's just the reality of what they're facing, that you're not going to be able to sell what you are now because kids haven't seen anything. And it sucks. It stinks. You use whatever adjective it is. It's not fair, but it's just the reality of what they've got. But when they get these guys on campus and they show their team and what they're going to do, they are going to be in the position at these other teams, and they're playing catch up with the 2021 class. Where you mentioned it, Auburn probably been on him for a while. This staff wasn't put together for like December and January, so they have limited time to develop relationships. And now you give them a year and you go into 2022, they're all going to be even playing field. I think they're going to kick butt. It's going to be a top 10 class. I feel top 10 is very attainable for them once we're all on the same playing field. They're not on the same level playing field as these other coaches around the country with the 2021 class. They're just playing catch up. And it's worked with some guys like Hunter Washington, but there's going to be other guys where it's not going to work, as you've seen with Garner Langlow, Caleb Johnson, those guys. It just doesn't. They're playing catch up, and that's just the reality of what they're facing. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom on the premium recruiting board, but you just got to accept what the reality is and just wait for these guys to show what their product is on the field. That's just, there's nothing else you can do, and you move forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I was kind of clumsily trying to explain is that, I mean, you want to talk about like on a micro look and level. I mean, Alex Atkins, how many parents really know about Alex Atkins? Yeah. I mean, he was, Georgia Southern, he was at Charlotte. Now we think he's going to be a really good coach. Mike Norvell spoke really highly about him. We've enjoyed our interactions with him. He had a guy draft, I think, 4th round in the NFL draft. But, these are the sort of things that are tough to build momentum when you're not a known entity to a lot of programs, high school programs. A lot of top tier recruits aren't familiar with Charlotte football or Memphis football, really, to be honest and truthful. But the relationships that were there, whether it's a legacy like, Jennings coming on board, and like Luke Altmaier, and you've mentioned a few times, I think, with Kenny Dillingham and Mike Norvell, for them to be able to identify a guy like Luke Altmaier and get him on board so quickly, that shows you that what this staff can do when they can build a relationship, when they have a guy that's familiar with what they're all about. They just don't have that opportunity right now to mass market themselves. But when it comes, the recruits will follow, but it's a frustrating time.
Right. And exactly, like I said, when they're on the level playing field, they can compete with anybody. I don't care who they're recruiting against. They can connect with people that, like kids like Luke Altmaier, who watched that have thrown for Mike Norvell and Kenny Dillingham back when they were at Memphis. Stuff like that. When it's an 11 playing field, they can compete with the best, and they got good. FSU has solid recruiters on their staff, but the reality is what the reality is, and that is that they're not on an even playing field in this 2021 class. So they're going to have to take advantage of the relationships they have and go out and trust their evaluations. And what I like is, they're not landing these transfers, offensive line guys, but they're actively pushing and going at. They're not slowing down. They're not saying, oh, well, we lost Isaiah Walker, so we're going to pull back. They haven't pulled back the reins. They're aggressively going after to fix these situations. They have backup plans. I'm sure there is a lot of offensive tackles that they're after in the high school front that they're already talking to that I don't even know about or anybody knows about at this stage that they're working on. We've already thrown out some new names like Jacoby Jackson, who I think they're trending in a good way for. So there's other guys in there. Just because I don't list them doesn't mean I don't have every single guy they're after, but I guarantee you the way they have recruited, they're aggressively going to fix their offensive line situation, but it's going to take time. As you said, the dynamics don't fit what they can do as far as compared to other schools.
All right, let's take some questions. We got a couple on the premium recruiting board, but let's start with somebody on YouTube. And it's a fairly uplifting question, so we can get on.
That's good. Right. I like uplifting.
Casey Bradley asks, who will be the next commit?
Yeah, that's a good question. There isn't anybody that's really set a timeline. I mean, I said this. I mean, I'm not going to change what I said on the board. I mean, I think wide receiver Destin Pazan out of Louisiana. I think tight end Michael Trigg is also a name, even though Trigg is not really given a timeline to decide right away. But as we've seen with these timelines, these things speed up. So kids see stuff and they're like, you know what? I mean, think they could wake up one day and it's like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I know the school that I feel the most comfortable with. I'm going to go ahead and commit to Florida State. So that's why I mentioned those two, even though they haven't given an exact timeline. I think those two and Michael Trigg Jr., which is the tight end, by the way, and Destin Bazan from Louisiana, I think those are the guys that are the most obvious, at least right now. I know people got excited because linebacker Andrew Jones had said, I got some big news on the 23rd. I don't think that's going to be a commitment. I think that's going to be more of a nearing list. I could be wrong. He could surprise me. I've been surprised before, but he's tweeted several times and told me several times that he wants to take official visits before, or a few official visits before he makes that call. So I think those two guys I listed are the most obvious ones right now. I'd even throw Jacoby Jackson in there. I think he's a possibility. Offensive tackle. There is a really good relationship there. They've been recruiting him since everyone got on staff. I think FSU's recruiting him the hardest. So I think those three are probably the ones that I got my eye on.
What is it? I mean, I guess it's relationships you're kind of saying. That's what makes you feel good about Pazan and Trigg?
Yeah, I think relationships. I mean, with Pazan, he's visited FSU 3 times in the spring, I think, 2 or 3 times. He's really close with David Johnson, which helps a lot. He really likes Dillingham. He likes how they're going to spread the ball around. He was actually one of those kids that actually could watch a practice and see what they do. I think Trigg was the same where he visited. I don't know if he saw a practice, but I think he understands and did study on how Norvell uses the tight end. They're going to take 2 tight ends in this class. So I think Michael Trigg will be one. And then on the new offers this week, I talked about Jackson West out of Alabama. That's a guy they just offered, I think, on Thursday. I think FSU leads there too. So I think there's several components that lead into it. Most of it's about relationships, but also kids that understand what Knight Norvell is. As you alluded to, some of these guys don't know who Atkins is, Marv is, what they're going to do. Norvell, those kids, I think, have a very good idea what this staff is going to be and what this team is going to be. And so that's why I list them.
Very well. You've answered some of these questions, it looks like, already on the premium recruiting board, Michael. You don't mess around, man. They ask a question, boom, you jump right on it. Let's see here. Guy Knoll's got a question. Maybe we both can answer this one. We can both jump into this one with our feet. So it's Guy Knoll. Let me pull it up here on our screen. Feel free to call in as well, folks. 850-792-5730. I think I have everything lined up for us to take phone calls. I hope so, because we've advertised it as such. Anyhow, Guy Knoll says, assuming we show some improvement this season, like can get lined up properly most of the time and win 8+ games, what does success in Norvell's first full year recruiting class look like in terms of a ranking? 1 to 5? Will it be top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20, top 25? Fail? His words, not mine.
Yeah, I saw it. I can read it. Top 15, I think would be a really solid job for FSU, and I think that's attainable. I've mentioned that's kind of my projection as far as I think they can finish with a top 15 class when you measure all the guys that they're involved with. Obviously, a full season to go to see get these kids on campus. I think top 15, top 20 is a very suitable point, because then that catapults you getting ready where you're on the same level as all these other coaches going into 2022. You're all on the same playing field. Then I think you're going to be talking about top 5, top 7 classes. That's when I think they're going to hit that. But kids have to see what your product is going to be. The kids that are committing are kids that are really sold on FSU. They know exactly what it's about, what the program's about. It's like Brandon Jennings, who committed to FSU. His dad played FSU. He's very aware of everything to FSU. They pushed hard for him, built a great relationship with Chris Marv. Same thing with Altemeyer, built a great relationship with Dillingham and Norvell, knew him from Memphis. There was a connection there. And then you go all the way back to Tate Rodemaker and Chubba Purdy from the previous class. They both had connections to Norvell and Dillingham. So I think that's the big thing is kids to watch, of kids that have relationships and kids that know what they're going to do. So I think that's what we're kind of looking at. And I think top 15, top 20 I think that will be a solid for this class going into what I consider a bridge recruiting year, because you're facing so many obstacles of relationships and kids knowing what your program is going to be, even more so now with this pandemic, where you basically got the spring football stripped from you, and it's not fair, but it is what it is. It's a reality that that they're kind of facing. So I think top 15 would be where I look at be a solid job.
Yeah, again, not to really belabor the point, but again, when the coaches on staff have been at Maryland, TCU, Charlotte, Memphis, like they don't have pre-existing relationships with 5-star recruits. Yep. Like you're not swimming in those waters. When you're at Memphis, you kind of know your lane and you stay in that and you recruit that kind of athlete. So they need to put something on the field.
Yep.
And now, games are what matters a lot. But to your point, Mike, you've been saying, like, if they had the practices, if they had a spring game to show, that could have maybe helped things out. But the fact that they don't have the pre-existing relationships with these big 5-star blue chip names, it's practically impossible. I mean, like, what could you sell? I mean, we all love Florida State, everyone that's watching this, but like, if you're an offensive line, like, what could they really tell you that you'd be like, all right, everything's going to totally work out for my son. This is the best decision for them. Unless, like, you're a legacy, or you're a guy that they've been talking to for months and years at the previous stops.
Not only that, the offensive line recruiting the last 4 or 5 years has been absolutely atrocious. Exactly. So you've gotten nothing out of that. You've had coach turnovers. I know Randy Clements got a job at Ole Miss, and then before that, I think you had Greg Fry, who didn't work out, and then before that was Rick Trickett, which there was a lot of chances and reaches that they were taking in offensive line that didn't pan out. So you're talking about a 4 or 5 year span where it's just been very disappointing and very poor. So kids are going to need to see something different about your program to make them feel good. They've gotten some kids last year, the Thomas Schraders, the Zane Herrings, the Lloyd Willises that are coming in this previous class that a lead coach, which I think Alex Atkins is an elite, solid offensive line coach. He's going to get a chance to develop those guys. And when he develops his guys and puts them in the places and gets the most out of them, kids are going to see that, but they have to see it on the field. You can't expect people just to commit to you because you're Florida State and you have the tradition name. That's not going to work, because you're basically starting over with a new staff. They have to see what the product they're going to do. It doesn't take much. I think 8 wins, and these kids are going to be a flock to FSU. What they just need to see. I mean, look at North Carolina. They won 7 games last year, 7 and 6, and kids are flocking like crazy to them because they know what they are. Kids need to know what FSU is, and once they do, we'll see a droves of kids coming to FSU. And I think recruiting will be an exciting time again for Florida State fans. I know it's really disgusting and doom and gloom, and it sucks to watch every week. And trust me, guys, I don't like covering it either when things are bad. I want it to be good. I mean, because it makes my job easier. But the reality is They got to keep plugging away with the relationships. They got plugging away of giving kids to give them a chance to watch them. And a lot of these kids that have committed, and I've said this in the last chat, when they committed, it's like some of these kids are place setter places where they just don't want to deal with recruiting going into their season. So they're going to get more active with it once the season starts. And there's going to be a lot of, I predict it's going to be a lot of decommitments. I looked this up, Aslan. There's over 300 kids that have committed at this time in May last year. This year, there's over 650 kids that have committed. That's double what you had last year. So there's going to be
with a pandemic, even with a pandemic going on, there's been double the amount of commitments.
Like almost triple. I mean, so that's like 300 to 600 is a massive jump amount of commitments. So I think there's going to be a lot of decommitments. I think a lot of these kids are going to visit. They're going to change their mind. There's probably going to be 2 or 3 decisions. I can't say who's going to do it, but I think there's going to be a lot of these because I see a lot of these commitments as place setter commitments where I got a place. I don't have to stress about this recruiting crap until season starts. And then once the season starts and you can take visits, then you probably see a change as far as some of these kids, verbal pledge of where they're going to go. But I think that's the important thing to realize is that yes, they're facing a negative of a pandemic of they can't have kids on campus, kids can't see what they are. But once kids see what they are, I think we're going to see some change in decisions. So that's the thing people have to remember. I know it's really hard right now because it's really frustrating to watch FSU's recruiting, but it's just what they are and what the challenges they're facing right now.
All right. Let's take another question from YouTube. Comes from Richard Griffiths. I think it's probably a little small for you to read. I'm trying to blow it up, but it's not moving. Anyhow, he asks, what is the area, particular location of the state, do they need to get better contacts in when it comes to recruiting, Michael? I guess never heard South Florida, right?
Well, considering they don't have somebody per se in South Florida. Now, I am excited that they have David Johnson's running the show there because David's an ace recruiter. He knows how to go into areas. I think in a year, that guy's going to build phenomenal relationships with kids in South Florida. He's going to pull several guys from that area that are elite, that are solid, that are FSU quality in the fans' eyes. So I think that's a state and area, South Florida, Broward. I think Ron Dugan's is pretty good in the Broward, Palm Beach area. But I think that's an area that they can build a strong contact with. And that's going to take a year, probably with Johnson. I think once he gets his hoofs in there, I think that's an area that people are going to see a big change in with FSU. But South Florida is a weird area because that's an area where it takes time to build some trust with kids inside of the area. And you don't just go in there the first year and bang, start pulling kids like crazy. So that's an area I think if I had to pinpoint one, it would be in the South Florida area. I like what they're doing in the state of Georgia. Obviously, the state of Louisiana are doing well. Texas, I think they're showing for the first time some serious inroads as far as relationships. In the state of Texas, you got Chris Thompson. You have Mike Norvell's originally from Dallas, Texas, I believe. Killian Dillingham has some ties to Texas. So there's several ties in the Midwest. There's several ties in Georgia. Alex Atkins is phenomenal in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So that will help them a lot. And I think they're making these kids that are local, like Terrion Arnold, Amari Harvey, these guys, I think they're making them a priority more so than probably even back when Jimbo was there, that they probably the best coaching staff I've seen that made the local kids a priority. So I think those are things to be encouraged by, but South Florida is definitely a place that I got circled that I think the connections need to be stronger and get better.
Let's go over to the premium recruiting board. If you're not a member of warchant.com, use the promo code WARCHANT30. You can ask all the questions you want. And you'll get them answered in written form, so you can come back to them later whenever you want. Or you can ask it for free on YouTube, but then you got to scroll through the whole entire hour of it and see when we answer it. Just saying. Pensacola in 1985, Michael says, so you can see it, but I got to read it anyways. It just makes it fun that way. Since we've had 2 offensive linemen leave recently, any transfer or JUCOs you hear we are going after?
I know they're going after transfers. I've already mentioned another one they're extremely active with is Jared Williams out of Houston, Texas. He's a guy that they've done several Zoom meetings with. He's done a virtual tour of FSU. He's highly interested in them. I think Miami, Baylor, USC are some teams that I hear in there. I did hear probably a day or so ago that there's some positive developments with FSU, the comfort level of how they're feeling about their chances currently, not projecting him to go to FSU or anything like that yet, but I think there's some positive conversations that are going on that, as far as how FSU's coming out of those meetings and how they're feeling about Jared. So I think Jared's one of them. I've heard they're after at least, there's 3 or 4 JUCO guys they're active with. I don't have names on those guys because they haven't been offered, or at least publicly offered. So once they're publicly offered, or I hear FSU's close to offering, I think I'll have more names for you. But there is about 3 or 4, 5 JUCO guys that they're after. I'm sure there's more transfers that they're also after, because we didn't even know about this Perez kid until this morning.
We got a call, Michael. Let's take it real quick here.
Okay.
Well, welcome on into the War Chant Recruiting Happy Hour with Michael Langston. I'm Aslan. Who's this?
Ranye.
Ranye, what's up, man? Gwinnett County in the house. Represent.
Gwinnett County, what's going on?
Not much, man. So this is how it works. Michael can hear you right now, but you can't hear Michael. So I'll let you ask your question, and I'll turn it over to Michael so he can answer it, man. What's on your mind, Ranye?
Well, 2 questions. Marquise Kilbrew, Grayson High School. What's the level of interest that he has with Florida State? Do you think we might can land him, defensive back? And then Barrett Carter, I'm hearing he's committed to Clemson, sent in a secret video already. Any chances of landing Barrett Carter out of North Gwinnett?
I'll start with the first one. Thanks for the call, Wanye. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining the show. But I'll start with the first one. Marquise Kilbrew, yes, there's a good shot there. He visited earlier this spring with a few other players from his school. Really liked Coach Woodson a lot. So I think they're very much in there. I think Georgia, Alabama is also in there, more so Alabama here, with, I guess, the biggest threat. But he definitely has a close connection with Coach Woodson. That's going to be a big deal when you talk about coming down to his decision. I don't think there's a team that stands out yet, but relationships are a big thing with Marquise. I think this is kind of similar to the Hunter Washington thing. I think if FSU can get him in for a game and he feels the same way about Woodson and also this defense, I think he's a guy that they could definitely have a strong shot with. And with Barrett Carter, I'll keep it simple. He's probably going to Clemson. I don't know about if he's made a video yet, and wouldn't surprise me if he did, but I just got the feeling when I talked to that kid, he just sounded like a kid, most of the kids that they get from Clemson. They need a linebacker, that kind of does some of the things he does. So I think he's going to Clemson. I think FSU did a tremendous job with him. But once again, this is what they're facing is that was like the first visit that he's had to go to FSU. So you really haven't had the time like these other schools that had 2 years to recruit Barrett Carter, whereas this staff's only had like half of off season. So I think that hurts them. Obviously, it's never easy going against Clemson, but I think that's kind of factored in where he's only made 1 visit to FSU. He's probably been to Georgia and Clemson like 3 or 4 times. That's a big deal when kids take multiple visits to another school compared to FSU. So I would say Clemson, but to your Kilbrew answer, question, I think there is a solid shot.
All right, well, I appreciate it.
You got it.
Thanks a lot, Ranye. Take care, man.
All right, thank you.
Ranye, also known as Georgia Knowles 86 over on warchant.com. So, yeah, he's always, not always. I think he's learned his lesson, unfortunately. He would ask Corey and I on the podcast, Wake Up Warchant, about recruits in Gwinnett County. I'm like, hey, man, I don't know. We'll get Michael on the program. But he knows his football when it comes to guys in the greater Atlanta area for sure.
Yeah, no, and we people, I'm just telling people, we encourage you to call because this gives a more personal reaction when I can hear you and I can talk to you, and we'd love to hear from you because we know everyone's suffering right now with all this pandemic stuff going on, and that's the best part of this chat. And when I get to hear from you guys and talk to you and interact with you, so please feel free to give us a call and it makes it a lot easier as far as how I can answer these questions.
Yeah, there's nuance that's tough to type out all the time. The voice can go ahead and command it. So let's take another question here from YouTube. Michael, comes from Stanley Edward. Who are the two safety prospects you feel will be in, not counting Arnold? Also, who are your three wide receivers in this class as of today?
Wow. Jumping in there with the big ones. I'll start with safety. I would say Amari Harvey, I feel pretty good about FSU. I think they're sitting in a very solid spot. I think I talked about Hunter Washington could end up playing safety. So I think he could answer your safety questions if he does end up playing the safety position. He can play corner or safety. I like him the most at safety when I watch Hunter's game. He's a ball hawk. His instincts are very good. You don't see a lot of turn and burn yet or tackling that I see with him, but his instincts kind of fits what a safety looks like, as far as when I watch his game. Cameron Graves, he's kind of a switch between a corner and a kind of a corner slash safety. So I think he could play at either position, but I think FSU, in my opinion, sits in a good spot with Cameron Graves, and I think they sit in a good spot with Amari Harvey. I also think Dink Jackson's another one that I think is probably leaning their way, even though Tennessee's pushing hard and they're coming on. But I think FSU still, if I had to pick a team, I think FSU would be the team to watch. And then the other guy is, Philip O'Brien. He's committed to Auburn. I talked about him last week in the chat at safety. He's the guy I think you should watch closely because grew up a big FSU fan. His uncles are Zach and Henry Crockett that played at FSU. So there's a lot of connections there. He visited FSU right after he committed to Auburn. So that tells you a lot about his interest, that he even went and gave FSU all that time. And he said FSU is going to be in it till the end, even though he is committed. So I think those are the guys to watch. I can't give you every receiver, but I would say Joshua Burrell from South Carolina is one to really watch. I think FSU's done a tremendous job there. They're trending in a positive direction with him. I think a guy like Tommy Hill out of Orlando Edgewater, he's a diehard Seminole fan. A lot of his teams that he has in his top list are West Coast, but make no mistake, I've talked to somebody that's really close to Tommy and tell me that FSU is in his mind. And as long as FSU goes hard after him, as long as FSU makes him a priority, they said they will be very surprised if he doesn't end up in this class. So I think those two are just a few at the top of my head. There's others I'm probably forgetting.
Well, Payson. Then you throw Payson.
Payson's another one. Keon Coleman, another Louisiana kid, I think they have a really good shot with. So all those guys, I think you could see in this class, end up in this class.
Again, the call-in number is 850-792-5730. Let's go back to the warchant.com premium recruiting board, Michael. Go pull this up right here. Futureborn, I think, is the name of the person. Now that both, again, Michael can read this. He knows that. But again, I got to do something here. I got to read. Now that both the Trinity Catholic offensive linemen are off the board, who are we, Florida State, in the best position to land as far as offensive tackles? Do the three players we recently lost give us an additional 3 scholarships for the 2021 class?
Well, I think people are seeing it now. Like, he's referring to Christian Meadows being medically DQ'd, which was something FSU already knew about for a while. I'm pretty confident in knowing and saying that. And I think
those don't sneak up, right?
Yeah, I think these guys like Mike Arnold, I think these are guys that they had already visioned of taking out. So I wouldn't necessarily give you additional scholarships. It will eventually when attrition kicks in and when all this stuff measures out, because we don't know who's going to get an offer that's a walk-on or whatnot. So we have to see that. But I'd say Jacoby Jackson is definitely one guy to watch. I've listed him a few times. I think another guy is I'm drawing a blank, is Bryson Estes is another one that I think you need to watch. He can play the tackle position. He can play guard. I actually like him a little more at tackle the more film I've watched of Bryson. So he's a really good one that they're really high on. Can play center. He's listed as a center, but I think he's more of a guy that can play either of those positions. Great length, great hand placement. He extends his arms very well, moves his feet. He kick slides very well as far as when I watch his game and how the different athleticism that he uses. I think he's a guy that Atkins is really high on, and they are pushing really hard there. I like FSU's chances there. So those are a few guys. Micah Pettis is another one. Depends on how
tackles.
Hard
tackles, Michael. They want tackles.
He's a tackle. Michael Pettis is a tackle. Bryson can play tackle. Jacoby Jackson can play tackle. I think a lot of these guys are, what you're looking for. And there's, like I said in the beginning of this broadcast, there's a lot of guys that I don't know about that they're probably heavy on, and they're just waiting to either offer them or get them on, some kind of campus tour, as far as either it's a virtual tour or just Zoom with them and stuff. So there is a lot more guys than just those guys I listed, but I would say Jacoby Jackson and Estes are guys that I kind of got circled right now that I'm looking at hard, that I think FSU has a really good shot at landing.
Yeah, crazy. Jackson's from outside of Dallas, going to Arlington, Texas, and pulling guys out. Hopefully, we got another question, but it's Stanley who asked a question about the wide receivers and the defensive backs. He's also a member on warchant.com. How awesome is that? He joined back in April 27th of 2020. So he's probably he's not. Yeah, he's still on the free membership. Renew it though, Stanley. We're here for you, man. We are here for you. All right, Michael. Let's go back to YouTube, maybe see if there's anything on YouTube. Actually, there's a guy on YouTube, One Swole Knoll. You know who I think he is, Michael? I think it's actually One Chop City One.
Oh,
I think he's
City.
incognito.
Oh.
I think I'm not 100% sure.
That would be awesome.
He's back.
He's awesome.
Oh, let's see here. Patrick James just says Terrion Arnold ? Exclamation mark.
So no question.
I mean, I guess he probably wants to know what's going on with Terrion Arnold.
Okay. I think Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, more so FSU and Alabama with him. That's the way it's been for a while. Now, I've said this in our last chat. I think FSU's best option to way they attack Terrion Arnold is make it a multiple sports type of thing, where you really bring in Leonard Hamilton, because the kid's a big basketball guy. He likes basketball as well. He'd like to do both. I think you show him. There's not many teams in the country that have offered Terrion Arnold that can compare with a top 5, top 10 national basketball program like FSU. So utilize that, but also utilize the relationships with Marcus Woodson, which he's done a really good job already with him. So is Norvell. So that's the best thing. If I'm FSU, and I think this is what they're doing, I would focus hard on the dual sport program. I think right now he's not really in a big hurry to decide. If I had to pick today, I'd pick Alabama probably, because but I think he's really seriously interested in FSU. I think the whole thing with Terrion, he just wants to see what this team will be. Like a lot of kids, they want to see, do they look how I think they're going to look? Are the corners aggressive? Are the DBs aggressive? Or do they get the blitz a lot? Or are they shutting people down? Are they getting a lot of picks? I think that's what he just wants to see, what's on the field. So he's not a guy I think will just jump in there and commit somewhere right away. I think he's a guy that he knows he has a spot at FSU. He knows he has a spot at Alabama. Georgia could push, so that's a potentially, but he's a kid that wants to see everything from a broad standpoint. And I think if FSU does those things, really harps on the dual sport thing, and then shows the product on the field, he's a guy that they have a serious chance with.
Right on. Let's go back to YouTube. Dan Spellman, one question. Do you think with Los Angeles shutting down through the fall due to the circumstances, the pandemic, that would lead to more West Side Knowles?
That's interesting. Yeah, LA's got an interesting dynamic they're doing where they seem to be away from the rest of the country where, we've seen the state of Florida, they talked about possibly hosting, Doak Campbell and UF hosting, NFL games and stuff like that. They seem to be more adept of opening this thing up in August from what I can gather. John Swafford, ACC commissioner, said that he thinks there's going to be football in the fall. So I think that could entice kids to leave the state of California, the West Coast, unless they're just so sold on like UCLA or USC or Oregon. If they're not sold on those teams, I could see a lot of those top kids getting out of Dodge and heading towards Florida or another area. So it definitely could benefit them. Certainly doesn't help that FSU can't host them on visits, but I think it could possibly be where if they do open up in August and we see visits and you can't do anything in California, that's going to be a major advantage for FSU or even teams in the South for those West Coast kids. And we could see more West Coast Noles if that happened. So if it keeps trending the way it's trending, I think it's very possible, that question the guy alluded to, could possibly happen because they're definitely after a lot of West Coast kids.
Back to YouTube. Chad Humphrey says that Mims definitely passes the looks test. Wonders, has anyone looked into the smaller, lower classification Bleckley County players that they play in for the GHSA? Could it be fool's gold because of the competition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know they're in Georgia, more so in the Atlanta, Warner Robins area that they seem to be active with. I don't know if they're in that small school area that they've really hit that in North Georgia yet. I don't get the impression they are. I don't see many offers out of Lowndes, Tift County. I think that area is probably what he's referring to. Clinch County, those kind of places. I don't see a lot of push yet there. So I don't think they are in there pushing for those areas just yet. I think what they're doing is they're focused on the guys that they know for sure these are guys that we are sold on, and we're putting hellfire and brimstone. We're going after these guys to make sure they're a priority. And then I think they're also recruiting these other smaller areas. I think that will happen probably in the next week or so. You will see more activity there. But I think their focus is mainly guys that they pinpointed that they know without a shadow of a doubt, these are guys we want in Georgia. And that's why we've seen so much activity in the Atlanta, Warner Robins area, maybe even Macon, even that part of Georgia. But I think we'll see more North Georgia when, or is it South Georgia? I don't know. But Valdosta, that kind of area, I think we'll see more of that as the weeks come, because people realize they're evaluating the whole country. So you can't get in every single area in every single state of the, of Georgia or everything state in the state of Florida. So I think what they're doing is pinpointing guys that they know they want, making those guys a priority, and then they're going to get to these small areas and really evaluate.
Little JR, just because you said hellfire and brimstone.
Hellfire and brimstone.
Just made me think about it. Let's go back over to YouTube. Question comes from Joseph Arnold. Does FSU have a shot from Brevard County Space Coast area?
I would probably say the only guy that I can say that they're really strongly active with is Dink Jackson. He's over there at UE Galley. I think he's the only guy that, James Blackstrain, he's a wide receiver also from that same Melbourne area. He's the guy they talked to, but I never got the sense, even when he visited, that it was like, oh, we got to have this guy. Keyshawn Spencer was a former FSU commit, probably, I think, is going to end up there with Jeff Scott at South Florida. I could see that happening, but I think Dink's the only one that I know off the top of my head that they're extremely pushing hard toward. I think Chase Smith is another one. He's a 4-star, I want to say defensive end, probably listed as an athlete. He's a guy that I think they're pretty active with. They're desperately trying to get on campus. I think Miami is a team that he's talked about often, but I think FSU is a place that he definitely desperately wants to go check out, and they're a team that he's very intrigued by. So I would say those two guys, the ones that if I had to pick in the area he's bringing up, in the Space Coast area, I think those two guys are the ones. Aslan can check on Chase Smith, but as far as where he's from, but I think those are the two that off the top of my head.
Your wish is my command, friend.
There we go. Yes,
Palm Bay. That counts, right?
Yeah, that counts. That's Space Coast. So, yeah, I think he's a guy they really are wanting. They like him as an edge guy. I think Chase is a guy that they've already, I think, offered. So they're active with him, and he's a guy they're pushing hard for. So he would probably be, if I had to do another targets list, which I already put one together. I was probably going to start releasing that soon. I think he would definitely be in there.
6'4", 185 athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a Hamsa or is he a receiver?
He's a receiver, but he can play in position. He's a good pass rusher, getting off the edge. He can do a little bit of everything when you watch his game. He's a very dynamic athlete. Like where he can end up is anybody's guess, but I don't think he's 185. I think it's more like 195, 200. So I think he's gonna. By the time he gets done with his senior season, you're talking about a kid that could weigh like 215 around there.
All right, Michael. This is me. It's not Michael.
Okay.
So there's a guy that keeps asking. This is a recruiting chat. He keeps asking us if there's going to be a football season in 2020. It's a recruiting chat. That's why I'm not reading your comments. And he's getting upset that I'm not reading his comments. Sorry, man. We're talking about recruiting.
I do think there's going to be a football season.
Yeah, there's going to be a football season. Probably. I don't think it's going to start on time. I mean, I think that's pretty much been what I've been saying on the podcast with Corey. I don't know where Corey stands on it. I think Corey's probably more bullish than I am. I'm a little bit maybe on the cautious side. I do think there's going to be football this season, but I do think it's going to probably not start on time. I find it hard to believe that they've been off campus for so long that they're going to feel comfortable being back in 45 days and we're going to be ready to play football. Yeah,
there's going to be some adjusting, as far as your schedule, when they start, when they get enough summer practices. I even told this to a friend of mine in high school, say they do hate the high school season. I could see them doing like back-to-back weekends where you have kickoff classics where so the kids get into the groove of stuff. Can't really do that in college, but I think you're right. I think it's going to be an adjusted schedule. I do think they're going to play football. I think most of the people in War Chant, Ira, Gene, Corey have said they're going to probably play.
Yeah, of everybody, I think Gene is probably the most optimistic. Right behind him, actually, probably maybe Corey, then Gene, then Ira, then me. But they're all pretty darn optimistic. I'm a little more skeptical. They don't have much skepticism what their viewpoint is on it. I also think there's probably not going to be fans. If there is fans, it's definitely going to be like less than 25% of capacity, right. I would think.
Right.
But hey, man, just play the games, right? Pipe in the music.
We throw out. See the stuff we throw out, guys. We give you free stuff that's not even stuff I cover.
This is kind of team related, but it's also maybe recruiting related too. Okay. A couple people have asked about it. Casey Bradley, nice gentleman, or maybe young lady. You never know. Real quick story. When I was in third grade, I had a girlfriend and we had a pen pal thing at our school with another school. And her pen pal was a person named Chris. And I got really jealous because she kept talking about how her and Chris would talk about DuckTales in their notes. They would write back and forth to each other. And we got in a couple arguments and we broke up with each other. Turns out the Chris was K-R-I-S. It was a Kristen. It was a girl. I had nothing to be jealous about. So
I was going to say, I'll throw a little thing in there. My middle name is Chris. So
really? Is it
a lot of people
not
don't
even
know
Christopher?
It's Christopher, but
okay.
That's what everyone called me when I was growing up, because he used my middle name, but never text with Christine. So I don't know.
There you go. Yeah. Well, Casey Bradley asked, could Chubba Purdy start?
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult for us to really have an opinion. Maybe Michael's looked at his tape probably more than I have. I've looked at it once or twice. He's quite talented, and I know a lot of people give more credence to Tate Rodemaker being on campus sooner, which was a good thing, but really what did he gain? There was only 3 practices. And obviously Valdosta, Georgia, really good high school football. But I think a lot of us here in the South really look down on everybody else in the country when it comes to their brand of football. But I'm telling you, man, like he was in suburban Phoenix. It wasn't like he was, in Idaho. No offense to our viewers in Idaho. Like he's playing legitimate teams. They have some pretty high-powered offenses on the West Coast too, and he was one of the more sort of prolific passers. Just his ability to buy time with his feet and throw the ball on the run out of the pocket, I think is pretty encouraging. Not that Mike Norvell or Kenny Dillingham want a dual threat quarterback, but listen, this offensive line is what it is, and it never hurts when you've got a guy who can improvise and kind of make some things happen when things fall apart around him. So I could see it possibly happening, but it's crazy to say. It's crazy to say no, because who has a leg up? There was 3 practices. It's a completely new staff. But again, we haven't seen him in person, so it's equally tough to say, of course. It's a possibility, though.
It is the possibility, and I know why people are excited, because you obviously have offensive line issues where you want somebody that's mobile. Well, he's probably one of the most mobile. That's why people love Jordan Travis, because he's mobile. He can move. You're going to have to get out of that pocket. Obviously, they feel like with this offensive line, you're going to have a dynamic athlete. And then you watch Chubba, just the way he slings that football. And then the way he athletically just pulls away from guys when you watch him run, jumps out at you. The problem, well, I'd say it's less of a possibility, is –
Hold on. Hold that thought, Michael. Sorry to interrupt, Michael. Hold that thought. We got a phone call.
Oh.
A phone call.
Okay.
Welcome on in to the Happy Hour War Chant Recruiting Q&A. Michael Langston's on the other line listening to you right now. Who is this?
What's up? This is Matt.
Matt?
From Orlando, Florida.
Matt from Orlando, Florida. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, how you guys doing? I
Good,
just wanted to know, were we in talks with Shedeur Sanders, Deion's son?
Michael.
That's a good question about Shedeur Sanders. I haven't heard a lot. I've heard more Louisville with that kid lately. I've heard that's the team that I hear that kind of stands out with Louisville. I haven't heard a lot about FSU. I haven't heard a lot about FSU with a second quarterback, to be honest. I mean, if I did, I'd heard more about Jake Garcia. He's committed to USC, who's the number 25, I think, prospect in the country. He's a guy that has a previous relationship with Dillingham. I have not heard of FSU pushing hard for Shedeur Sanders. In fact, I think his stock's kind of dropping. The fact that there's no slight against Louisville. My good friend Dave Lackford runs that site. But you could tell the stock's kind of dropped a little bit for Shedeur, as far as the major schools just really pushing hard, even though there's several schools in there. But I think Louisville's the team right here that is kind of got a little momentum with him, but it's still very early. I don't think he's in a rush to decide. I will check on that. I will check on my FSU contacts to see if there's any change or if they're active with him or if he's a guy they like. But they are really sold on Luke Haltemeyer, and that's why I don't think they're pushing hard for a second guy right now. But if they did push for a second guy, I think it would be Jake Garcia and not Shedeur Sanders, if I had to guess. But I will check on that for you, Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, man. Thanks, man. You said Matt, right?
Yeah.
Matt, right?
I hope
right
so. I said Matt, so I hope it is.
Yeah.
But
thanks for the call there, Matt.
Yeah.
We're winding things down, but go ahead, Michael. I didn't mean to jump you there.
No, it's okay. Back what I was talking about with Chubba, he's dynamic, but the problem with that scenario is he was really dealt a really bad hand that there was no summer practice. So now he's going to be coming in. He doesn't get any practices really until the team reports. So he's coming in really fresh. I would give more credence to Tate Rodemaker being the guy. Tate's a prolific passer, probably a better drop back passer in this system. Doesn't throw a lot of picks, and he's very good with that. I think what you could see, if by some chance Tate wins the job, because you just pointed out, Aslan, we don't know who the heck is going to be the guy. I mean, James Blackman was a turnover machine for FSU last year. It's horrific. He hasn't worked. We don't even know what Jordan Travis is going to do. Now, Norvell's really good at developing passers. If he can get James to get his middle game right and also physical game right and making decisions, maybe this is a moot point and James will be the guy. But I think if you're talking about a young guy, I would, as far as a freshman, I would say Tate has the best shot because Tate's been there for a spring He's worked with Dillingham some. He's worked with Norvell, even in a small capacity. He's worked with those guys. And out of the two, I think Tate's a more consistent passer. But I think what you could see, say by some shocking reason, Tate won the job. I think you're going to see some packages in there with both Jordan and Chubba that you could see FSU utilize them if they decide they don't want to redshirt Chubba.
All right. Well, hey, here's the last one. We'll take it from Frank Smith. He asks, how's it going your way, Mike? And also asks how we look at the center position.
Very good so far. By the way, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. I'm actually watching my dog in the backyard, but as I do this, but I'd say the center position are looking really well because we mentioned Estes that can play, interior or outside, tackle. I personally like a little bit more interior, but I've been I like what I see of Estes from, the tackle position when I see different things he does. So I think you got Jake Slaughter in there. Like I said, FSU got on him really early. I'm sure Auburn will try to get the trifecta and try to get all three of those Cali kids, but I think FSU was on him so early that that's a big deal. So they solidified that position. You obviously have Andrew Baselli, Babion Johnson. They're still trying to get a transfer, it seems, at the center position to really solidify that competition. But I think recruiting-wise, they're doing pretty well at the center position. I think if they get Estes, that really solidifies it all, and you're feeling really good about that position.
All right, that's a wrap for us, Michael. Do you want the final word?
I appreciate it, guys, and once again, this is a lot of fun as far as doing the happy hour. Aslan, appreciate Aslan putting all this together, and we appreciate you guys viewing in. I know it's not an easy time, and I know it's a frustrating time, especially after today, about how things have gone as far as recruiting. But the main thing is you have to understand it's a marathon, not a sprint. There's a full year to go as far as these kids committing, decommitting, making decisions. Classes aren't put together in May. Classes are put together down the line in November and December or even October. So this is a long process. I know it's hard to be patient. They're going to go through challenges. They're going to go through up and downs. But I think at the end of the day, if they get to show the product that I think we're going to see on the field and we have a season, they'll host visitors. I think they'll get the momentum they're looking for. Like I said, top 15 classes and top 15, top 20. I think if they get that, I think FSU fans will be happy with what they see.
There you go. From the recruiting guru's ears to your lips, or lips to your ears, or whatever it goes. He's Michael Langston. I'm Aslan Javani. Thanks for joining us. Go to warchant.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, practically. Michael's answering your questions over on the Premium Recruiting Board. Michael, as always, thanks, man.
You got it.